Hello, dear friends. We're sincerely happy to greet you again. And today we're going to talk to the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Hello.
Igor Mikhailovich, as of today, the world is facing one crisis after another. Today, billions of people face a lot of uncertainties that accumulate, overlap, and intertwine. All this is certainly aggravated by the interplanetary climate change. And of course, in order to overcome all these problems in society, we need a global consolidation of people in building the creative society. Yet, there are also certain problems that we, people, still need to overcome. And one of the problems is actually a lack of trust in society. As of today, less than a third of people trust one another. In other words, we don't get along with each other, and this is very scary in fact. The entire society actually needs reconciliation and unification. Well, and the most important problem is also that of overcoming passivity. Today, a great many politicians and even religious figures already admit that as a society, we are in a state of some kind of collective paralysis. In terms of those changes, the most curious thing is that it is exactly believers who are the most inert. Those are people who understand perfectly well what's going on in society, what's going on in the world, who understand that these are not just crises, but the signs of the last hour. And here's how consciousness thinks and suggests to people what decisions they need to make. It says the following: if what is going on was predicted in all religions, it means everything is happening according to a plan and the end is inevitable. So who are we to oppose the Creator's will? Everything that is going on is happening by the will of God, so that we would recall Him. All we can do is just love. It's a test of our strength and our faith. You are a true believer if you love despite anything. And certainly, a very large number of people hear in their heads exactly these kinds of thoughts, that the task of believers is simply to humbly wait, to wait for the end, to wait for some kind of a final scenario and simply love. Is this really the case?
As a matter of fact, I would like to ask those believers a question. If you really believe in your religion so much, I emphasize in religion, not in God, they don't believe in God, then, based on the canons of your own religion, answer, please, in such a case, what is the last universal judgment for? What is it for? If God is doing everything, if He coordinates every step of every person, if the only thing He does is move us like pieces on a chessboard, He decides for us when we stumble, when we fall, whether we should get up or not, whether we should wake up in the morning or not, and which foot to get up on. God just deals with everything, right? Then, what is the sinfulness of people? Nothing. What are we to be judged for? For nothing. Hence, He should judge Himself. Is that how it works?
Here, for example, Christians, who are a great many in the world too, should recall what Jesus Christ said and how He would separate sheep from goats. We actually raised this topic in one of the videos, and He would renounce those who didn't help their neighbor.
Well, again, based on the canons of certain religious groups, which say that every step we take goes according to God's will, then what do people have to do with it? Why help anyone or do anything if God rules?
Everything is predetermined. That's
Everything
right.
is predetermined. Yes, if I want to help, God will do it instead of me, or through me, or how to proceed from there. You see, this confusion to which some religious organizations have brought people nowadays is simply scary. They zombified people, simply dehumanized them, and instilled inaction in them, saying that all power is from God. Who among you, friends, hasn't heard that all power is from God, and you must be silent against those in power? I mean, what was the reason for saying this? That anyone who comes to power, whether he's a king or whatever he is called, is God's appointee, right? And people have no right to say even a word against him. Otherwise, they will blaspheme against God. Well, my friends, except Paul, no one said that at all, especially not Jesus. And here, I said it for a reason. that there are people who believe in religion while there are people who believe in God, and the difference between them is huge. Those who believe in God listened to the words of the prophets. They listened to the words of Jesus Christ. What did the prophet and Jesus Christ say? Actually, all the prophets said,
Yes.
Love one another, you are equal. Build the creative society, if we put it in our terms, right? After all, it's all the same canons that there's nothing more valuable than human life and
To
love.
safeguard God's creation, to preserve the world.
Of course. Isn't it true? So their will was aimed at building the creative society, and all they bequeathed was peace, love, and mutual respect. Isn't that right?
Sometimes they even sacrificed themselves to make it better for someone else.
Yes, all of them sacrificed themselves, of course. In any case, we've already talked a lot about Jesus, and we've talked a lot about the prophet, and we've talked about others who were before them. Didn't they sacrifice their lives for people? They did. They sacrificed every moment of their lives because that's what they lived by, and that's why they came here. Isn't that true?
Yes, in order to save life.
Of course. Whereas demons in the heads of some people instigated them to turn teachings into religious structures that would be acceptable to authorities. I emphasize, that would be acceptable at the state level and so on. Those demons who tried, well, some of them did get to power, both in one case and in the other. Let's put it so. They actually did it for themselves, since they are, let's say, at the helm of these organizations. It means this is also by the will of God, and everyone must obey and follow their orders. This is exactly the opposite to what Jesus Christ said, and exactly the opposite to what the last prophet said, isn't it? However, everything was immediately altered. While people, let's say, certain groups of people accepted all this, and we eventually have what we have. Excuse me, we stand on the edge, that edge which Jesus Christ talked about, and which the best of the people of this world, the Prophet Muhammad, talked about. Isn't that right? It is. But they also said that we can change everything, and we can actually still come to the golden millennium, and more than one millennium. They also mentioned that. So, should we do nothing? Should we shift all the responsibility unto God, like young children unto their parents, and be slaves of Shaitan in our organizations? Or should we actually love the Lord God, listen to our prophets, and finally start following them and fulfilling what they wanted, and not what people invented afterwards? And the world will change. After all, this is easy. Right?
Love, precisely in action.
Absolutely right.
Not as a passive feeling, yes.
Do you know that not a single religious organization has taught people to love the Lord? To fear? Yes. To obey? Yes. Everyone tells you that you are God's slave, but no one, neither Jesus nor the prophet, said that we are God's slaves. That's where the truth is. Then where did this concept of God's slave come from? Well, we already discussed this more than once, so let's not repeat that, friends. You all understand it very well.
You know, Igor Mikhailovich, our viewers also wrote that when one gets to know the truth, one becomes freer.
Certainly.
Because somewhere deep inside, one still understands where the truth is, whether one is being deceived or not.
Of course.
That the truth itself prompts one right from within, where the truth is and where the lie is. And that...
Do you know what's good about the current end times? And it's a fact that these are the end times. Only the dumbest idiot believes that they are not the end times. These are the end times, friends. And it depends on us whether humanity will exist after these times or not. That's what our prophets told us about. So do you know what makes them wonderful? What do you think?
It's time for the truth.
It's time for the truth. You know, it's already pointless to keep silent.
And it is also the bifurcation point, Igor Mikhailovich, when there are actually so many crises that,
Yes,
compared to other periods of time, it takes only some minor actions to turn this whole system and the entire course in the other direction.
well, currently, yes, indeed. Currently, there are crises, both economic and geopolitical ones, and we are already being told openly That's it. Any day now, a nuclear war may start, and so on. Well, guys, take advantage, rejoice, throw off the shackles, take a deep breath, and think. Do you know what the truth is? The truth is that even those very bombs are made by us. We launch them and we service them. Everything depends on us. Even those who will say, there will be war, they won't be able to wage it without us. And that's where the truth actually is. What do we really want? After all, it is us who fight in wars for them. Isn't that so? What are they without us? Or who are they without us? Nobody and nothing. That's where the truth is. As for us, we already have nothing to lose. And this also gives a certain degree of freedom. When you look at the world with an open mind and realize that you don't have much time left, if we don't change anything, right?
People act more courageously, more decisively in such conditions,
Yes,
right?
somehow calmer, you see. Even if
And
someone...
they feel that the truth is on their
Yes,
side.
even if someone is strongly against it, those are already his personal problems, right?
Right. And of course, now is the time when one shouldn't keep silent, because the triumph of evil is possible only when people who know the truth,
Yes.
who feel the verity, when they keep silent. Therefore, this silence is unacceptable.
Yes, the most terrible thing is silence. Silence, inaction, and shifting responsibility, one's own responsibility, onto someone else's shoulders, using God, one's own cowardice or something else, as a cover. My friends, you are not sheep after all. Stop being animals. It's time to become people. Moreover, grown-up people, to take responsibility for yourselves, and everything will work out. And you shouldn't shift responsibility onto anyone. Let the presidents do that, and so forth. Those presidents are people too. They also have children. They have relatives and loved ones. They also want them to live. It's just that they don't know what to do in this case. Just because someone would write them a letter or tell them, well, as long as they are in the game, in the consumerist format, they won't be able to change anything. And this will continue until we, every person in the whole world, have a desire to change this very consumerist format of ours, which has already gone so far that no one even knows what to do with it, until we change it to the creative one. Right?
Right. Because indeed the whole world has become hostage to those principles that were in fact invented by the dead.
Of course.
You were right to say that the world is ruled by the dead.
Tell me, please, would living people who have a hope for the future, for a wonderful future, build such a world? Namely, a world of lies, deceit, manipulations, murders, filth. Is this humane? A simple question. No, it's not humane. It's beastly. Although, in this case, I don't want to offend animals either, because animals are more humane than we, people. Animals do not do to each other what we do to one another. We should ultimately ponder on this, grow up, and change everything. Right? And all the more, people should not use their religions as an excuse to sit back and do nothing. Do nothing, but others will die because of you. What will you tell your God? Although you won't tell him anything, because you won't get there if you live by such principles. Your God is Shaitan. He immobilizes you, and it is him you report to. While alive, normal people will go to God. Even if we take the worst case scenario and won't have time to change anything, we will at least have time to change ourselves. And even in this chaos, in spite of all problems, we will have time to gain life, friends. Then the Lord and our prophets will welcome us. And we won't be ashamed to look into their eyes, because we've been fulfilling their will until our last breath. Right?
Igor Mikhailovich, you often say that it is time to grow up, and people certainly understand to what extent something much greater is embedded in these words. Because a grown-up person is both the one who takes initiative and the one who assumes responsibility. And it's important to grow up spiritually in the spiritual sense in order not to be hostages and not to be in slavery to the dead.
And here's the answer. If you want to be alive, be alive. If you want to be an adult, grow up. Then you'll be among adults, my friend. But if you want to remain a child and shift your responsibility onto Satan, shift it, then you'll remain a child and together with Satan. In heaven or in the world of the Lord God, there must be grown up, free, God-loving beings who love each other and whom we call angels. It won't work any other way. Shaitan and his slaves do not belong there, and everyone draws appropriate conclusions by looking at oneself, right? What I mean is that every person can change himself. Well, there are cases when a person has gone too far and will not be able to gain life, but he can at least earn peace, right? And this is very valuable, friends.
Igor Mikhailovich, you've just said that every person can change himself.
He can.
And regarding this very spiritual work on oneself and the influence of the dead on the living, we receive a lot of questions. Basically, we already released 2 videos on this topic.
Yes, we have stirred up the topic.
We've stirred it up.
At your request, friends.
As a matter of fact, we still receive questions.
I understand.
In particular, concerning the spiritual work on oneself, is it really so important for a person to understand and distinguish from whom various desires and mindsets emerge in him? Whether it is 60,000 thoughts a day that come from consciousness, and the system thus bombards a person's energy structure, or thoughts, mindsets, and desires come from subpersonality. Is it so important to understand from whom it all comes in order to cut it off in oneself, to stop it?
There is no difference at all, you know? I'll tell you the following. There is one cure for all these symptoms. It's a road to God. There is no other way. It doesn't matter whether it is subpersonality, third forces, Satan, or whoever else. If your goal, my friends, is to come to the Lord God, then go towards Him. You shouldn't pay your attention to all these trifles, so to say, right? If a person departs from point A to go to point B, and he wants to arrive there, for example, during daylight hours, but on the way he stops and examines every pebble and every leaf, do you think he will make it or not? He won't make it even with a short road, right? So my friends, why examine all kinds of thoughts, whoever they are from subpersonalities, from consciousness, from anyone else? What for? If they are destructive, if they do not lead you to the Lord God, and if these thoughts do not give you a practical benefit as a human being, even in everyday life, those are distracting images which are imposed on you from the outside. Whatever, even from within, from a subpersonality. The recipe is simple. Love God, go towards Him, and everything will be fine.
There was another question regarding how dangerous or safe it is to use the skills and experience that a subpersonality has. On the one hand, it's good to have such a smart additional consciousness, but on the other hand, you said that this kind of symbiosis can lead to a point that a person will also become a subpersonality and, moreover, will feed this subpersonality after death.
You know, after we talked about this, a lot of people wanted to have this kind of very smart subpersonality that would handle all their issues for them, including, let's say, the issues of career, wealth, and megalomania of this personality. Or, to put it simply, so that subpersonality would work hard, while personality would get paid.
So is this a personality a kind of a jackpot, or is it a punishment for a person?
It's a punishment. Why? Even if it's a very good symbiosis, a beneficial one, so to say, and it's not an aggressive subpersonality, but it provides hints and help. It works like a well-developed intuition, like a good intellect, and so on. It's a dead man. And the entire goal and task of subpersonality is to consume your life instead of you, for its own purposes, and ultimately to make you slaves. There can be no other way. We have to understand that those are diabolical forces. It's already a slave of Shaitan, and it won't act any other way. We have to know that. Therefore, we shouldn't rely, especially on demons, genies, and shaitans, on anyone. We should rely on the Lord God and on ourselves, right?
Yes, we shouldn't play with it.
We shouldn't. It's a
The
bad
tool is
game.
dangerous.
It's a very dangerous tool. It does not lead to anything good, that's for sure.
Igor Mikhailovich, you've touched upon the topic of hints, and the following question was asked. If a loved one dies and goes to God, can he appear in dreams, give some hints, and provide such informational assistance?
You see, again, who asks such questions? Those who want their relatives to be in heaven. But at the same time, they come to them and give them real hints or something else. It is clear that this is not just, say, the activity of our consciousness, because consciousness might not know what the deceased one came and told us. But if the deceased came to you, my friend, then he's not in heaven. Believe me. No one comes back here from there. Well, they come back, but only by the will of the Lord God, and not to help you specifically in your dream and suggest something to you, but to serve the spiritual world here and for all humankind. That's true.
So if he comes in a dream, it means that he's not quite alive after all.
Unfortunately, yes.
And there is a secondary benefit from such hints and such advice, the benefit for the system,
Certainly, for sure.
consciousness, and subpersonality itself.
Yes, the devil does nothing without a reason, friends, and if he helps you, you'll pay dearly for it. Remember that.
And there is another question, Igor Mikhailovich. Certainly, there are a lot of conflicts in the world, as well as a lot of disputes and microfights in relationships among people, in their families. People asked the following question: can subpersonalities somehow group together and act in a coordinated way like a gang? Well, for example, contact each other and purposely set people against one another.
Easily. Of course they can. They even set humanity against each other right now. They can. And this is not fiction, unfortunately. That world is complex, and it obviously affects this world, but it affects this world because we have created such a world by our silence and inaction. We feel and understand what is wrong, but we think, what can I do on my own? And that's the way everyone has thought. All of us together have found ourselves in a world where Shaitan reigns, where there is no room for God's love, and where we are enemies to each other. Isn't that so? Isn't that the kind of world we've created, friends? Is it supposed to be like this? Yes, here, Shaitan is the prince of the world. But he rules this world just because we allow him to. His power is our power. It is us who endow him with power. And it is us who do what he commands us to do. Yet, it's enough for us just to return to the source, to return to God. And everything will improve, and the world will change. But for that, we should make an effort, and for that we should unite. Then everything will fall into place.
Igor Mikhailovich, you have said such significant words about the importance of returning to the source and returning home, because still one can see that in order to somehow minimize or reduce the influence of subpersonalities, the influence of the dead on the living, people choose slightly different tools. So they ask themselves questions: how can we actually minimize it, perhaps by getting rid of the property of the deceased somehow? Years later, many people have decided to burn a lot of things: towels, kerchiefs, tableware that belonged to their deceased relatives, and so on. Does this solve the issue? Let's say that now, years after their relatives and loved ones passed away, in this way to get rid of the influence of the subpersonalities on their lives.
Well, if it helps them psychologically, go ahead, friends. but it is psychological help. If you took something from a dead man, you paved the way to yourself. This is really so. But if you've already used that item, then whatever you do with it, you've already accepted it. What's the point in taking good things and destroying them? Again, let's speak honestly. People destroy what they don't care to lose.
Right.
Well, greed, everything else.
Of course.
Guys, don't be ridiculous. If you want to play around, then play around. But if you want to be free, be free. There is no higher value in this world than human life, than your life, my friend. Nothing in this material world can be more valuable than your life. Remember that and cherish it. Then everything will be fine. Right?
Right. One should actually shift the focus of attention more towards the point that everyone needs to choose spiritual liberation for
You
themselves.
see, it's the consumerist format. Here we have...
Many people worry, what will I leave to my near and dear ones? What will I leave to my children? How, to whom should I give this 10%, pay a tithe, so that this property would be passed to my children as a clean legacy, and so on. But people forget what times we now live in.
Whom will this legacy serve? I'm asking a simple question. If there is no one, and there is no inheritance of yours, my friend, the best legacy we can leave to our children and grandchildren now is really the creative society, in preserving this world, as well as preserving all of humanity. That's the best legacy. While in the creative society, your property will be of no use to any of your relatives or friends, except for, perhaps, a photograph as a memento, nothing more. Why? Everything will be available there, and in abundance. That's the point of the creative society, so that there wouldn't be anyone in need of either food, clothing, or housing. As for gold, it won't be valued there. It is valuable here, nowadays under the consumerist format, because it has an exchange value. You can buy bread or something else for it. Whereas in the creative society, it will merely be metal. Yes, it's a good conductor, though, I'll be honest, not the best, but a good one.
In fact, this whole conversation demonstrates what the values are right now in the consumerist format of society and what the values should be in the creative society, in the world which the prophets dreamed of.
You see, Tatiana, this very world that the prophets dreamed of should have been built by those who swore love and devotion to our prophets already a long time ago, and they were supposed to start building it right away. However, instead, we have what we have. But the time has come, my friends, for us to fulfill the will of our prophets. Otherwise, we will never do that. I'll put it as follows. We have the last chance to fulfill the will of our prophets, and we shouldn't miss it. That's the right thing to do.
You know, Igor Mikhailovich, we were also asked a question about the Prophet Muhammad and regarding the fact that at the end of his life, it was very important for him to give away everything he had, all his belongings. He had 7 dinars left, and he was still worried and concerned as to whether they were given away to the poor or not. Why was it so important for the Prophet Muhammad, for the man who became alive and returned home to the house of Allah, that he paid so much attention to distributing that property, the last 7 dinars?
You know, it's a serious question, in fact. Why? Because the best of people, to this day, he is the best. The Prophet Muhammad devoted his entire life to people, to you, friends, regardless of your religions and views. But he really devoted it to people, and he told those who were Muslims, those who followed him, those who were devoted to Allah, that they should follow his example. His life was supposed to be an example for every Muslim and nothing else. With his life, he showed people how to act. And this last example of his, I wouldn't say it was the last one. There was more. Never mind. So this example with those coins is also very, very important. Why? He gave away everything before he died, while he was still alive, so as to leave nothing behind, understanding perfectly well that there would be those followers who would fulfill the visible, but would not fulfill the invisible. After all, his life was divided between the way he lived in society and that inner world which made him the Prophet, and thanks to which he is now loved by Allah in his home. This is very important. However, if a person keeps a property which will be passed down as inheritance, hence, by becoming a subpersonality, that person will come after the property, and the dead will hinder the living. He will devour their lives. Shaitan is strong anyway, while in this case, there are also the dead. Therefore, being the Prophet, understanding and knowing it all, he acted as an example.
There is one more question, Igor Mikhailovich. If a person has spent his lifetime in such a way that he has neither acquired property here nor formed life in himself, a real true life, does this indicate that perhaps he will exert less influence
No.
on his relatives and friends in some way?
A property is what subpersonality, let's say, comes after.
It's a trace.
It's a trace, yes. But even if a person doesn't have anything, he hasn't preserved his assets, he will still come to his relatives and close people. Why? He's in pain, he has a hard time, he suffers, and he wants relief, whereas only the living can give relief to a dead one by their stupidity.
So it doesn't matter whether these are relatives or close people, it's those whom he simply contacted during the day in his lifetime that is more often.
It does matter. It's really relatives and close people. And by close people, I mean those who were near him for years.
In contact.
In other words, a person close to him. Yes, the dead will come to such people.
We were also asked to analyze the following situation. When a living person remains indebted to a person who died, sometimes it happens that one borrows something and the person dies. What to do in such cases?
The point is that if a person,
You owe the deceased.
yes, borrowed money from a person who died, logic suggests
He is lucky.
100%. In fact, he is unlucky. And I would recommend, friends, in such cases to give all the debt within 9 days to his heirs. And the sooner, the better. That's the right thing to do. One won't get rich on that because the one who died will come after that money. He will come for sure. Only he will take not money, but something much more valuable.
Igor Mikhailovich, what if a child is named after a dead person? Does a subpersonality affect the child's life in this way?
No. In no way. It doesn't matter how or in whose honor a person is named. What's important is what the person will be like. The name is not an address in this case.
And the following question, are organs an address, the organs of a person who died and thus became a donor?
You mean transplantation, right?
Yes, exactly, for the living.
It affects very much, of course. There are cases when a living person just shares his liver or kidney, or, for example, one of paired organs with his relatives, or a person sells them, whatever. This doesn't have any influence at all. When an organ is transplanted from a living person, there is nothing wrong. But very often, a person dies in an accident or something else, and his organs are transplanted to people, let's say, in an attempt to save their health. And it has often been noticed how people change after that. Why? Because there is a fragment of the body of a dead person, which means it's not dead, while the person is dead. Subpersonality will be nearby for sure, and it won't bring anything good. This is really true.
A lot of studies were conducted, and it was noted how life, some habits, and character of a person changed when those organs were actually transplanted.
Yes, that's true.
And many people even think that in the case of heart transplants, maybe the soul is somewhere in this organ, and thus a part of the soul or a part of personality passes into a new body. and influences a person in that way.
Unfortunately, it is simply a trivial dead man who experiences suffering and pain, and he has come to a living person for an anesthetic,
At this point, he seizes.
while the living one acts on him as an anesthetic. The person just had an organ transplanted. His health is bad enough. The surgery wasn't cheap, and in addition, he gets a dead man. The option is so-so.
It is surprising that in our world we still have these problems associated with healthcare. At that time, when they already talk about 3D printing of some organs,
They grow organs.
they grow organs to such an extent.
That's the best option.
The creative society basically frees us even from these kinds of problems.
If we take healthcare in the creative society, which can really be there, then you do not even need transplantation there. Why? Everything can be easily corrected inside a human himself, in any condition, so to speak. If a person is still alive, he can definitely be appropriately restored to the fullest. You don't even need replicators to create any organ in this case. This is really so.
This is already during the transition period as well.
The transition period is a transition period.
It is necessary.
During the transition period, it all needs to be developed. Science needs to be developed. We need to get to the point, let's say, of operating a certain kind of energy, which so far we see how it manifests. We understand that it exists, but officially, we haven't yet learned how to use it, you see? In other words, there is still a lot to learn. This is what the transition period is for. Also, the transition period is important for us to move from the consumerist format to the creative one. Again, this is our attitude to life, our behavior, and many other things. Let's say, our way of life will change because many things will change. Well, this is such an adaptation period, from the bad to the better. I would put it this way, friends. And it takes time to...
The right habits are formed.
Absolutely.
The unwanted neural connections of old habits die off
100%.
when they are never repeated.
That would be good, yes.
Right. Igor Mikhailovich, here is another question. You've touched upon the subject of the replicator. And we've also been asked a question. People don't understand how it happens that something appears out of nothing. How does this replicator that will be in the creative society work?
My friends, let me explain. The replicator is based purely on physical laws, and something cannot appear out of nothing. In order for something to appear somewhere, we need at least something out of which will consist that which will be manifested, plus the energy to do it. And the most important thing is the information about the item or thing we want to manifest. Nothing ever appears out of nothing, just like that. Well, it could be a long story, but let's just say, okay, approximately, it happens like this. That's how it happens. I understand that friends will say, it's a sleight of hand, video editing, whatever. Believe me, in this case, it doesn't play any role at all. The important thing is that out of nothing, as it would seem, there appears something good, important, and necessary, right? Well, you don't need it for sure. You have your own one. So, my friends, the world is much more complicated and simpler than it seems to be, and we do not know a lot of things so far. Well, we know, let's say, but not everyone knows. Not everyone has access to something. And indeed, we don't know certain things yet, but they exist in the world. The world is very diverse. It is really beautiful and interesting. That's why the creative society is necessary. Well, since you don't need it, and unfortunately, there's no aspirant for it yet. Let's show how the reverse process works as well, right? I mean, a lot of people are actually interested in how unnecessary things will be disposed of, or so far unnecessary things. Everything is as simple as that. Somewhat. In a similar way, the replicator actually works. But for energy saving, the replicator must have, let's say, a certain design. It has to be something where an electromagnetic field is generated. Not an electromagnetic field, in fact, my friends, but for our understanding, it has to be, let's say, a certain box or case in which a special field is generated, okay? For our consciousness, let it be an electromagnetic field in which sort of antiparticles manifest. You see, antiparticles are retained in an electromagnetic field. Well, we all know this has been imposed on us by cinema and the like, so without breaking the mindsets or arguing about trifles, we will explain it this way. And in this very space, so to say, it can manifest itself. But in reality, if, as a civilization, we reach, let's say, the third level, we will be able to simply create whatever we want in space. And there will be no problems and no limitations. This is also true.
And the values shift purely to the spiritual.
You know, material values are valuable as long as they have power over us. But when they have no power over us, all their value becomes nothing, right? While the most valuable thing in the world, my friends, is love. Love for God and love for each other. So, my friends, let's just love each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is the best legacy we can leave
Definitely.
to future generations.
Definitely. Thank you, friends. Thank you for being here.